Hi, I'm Elizabeth Thompson, and we get to talk about Genesis 24. This 67 verse chapter, in short, is a love story. We love love stories and we love happy endings, right? Sometimes the windier and more complex, the better and more satisfying the happy ending, when the two people that you're wanting to come together finally do. It's a storyline that's often repeated, and for good reason. Isaac and Rebecca's love story in Genesis 24 is the long version, the backstory with all the details and twists and turns and unknowns along the way. It's a story about trusting God and making decisions, and it's a story about God bringing two people together. And at the end of the day, just like at the end of a wedding day, no matter how it all happened, the groom has his bride and the bride has her groom. And our hearts are satisfied. I've been to a couple of weddings recently, and being a witness at a wedding always busy to look back and look forward at the same time. And that's what this story does for us, because the gospel is the greatest love story. But we'll come back to that. So let's dive into our text. We've got four main characters in this story: Abraham, the servant, Rebecca, and Isaac. And we're going to break this passage down by taking a look at each one of them. So we jump right in at the beginning with Abraham and his servant. So what do we know about Abraham from this text? That he is old and blessed in all things. We know this. We've seen it happen over the last many weeks of this study. He is blessed materially with great possessions, and he is blessed most importantly with a relationship with the living God, who has made a covenant with him and all the generations that are going to come from him. And he is very concerned with finding a bride for his son Isaac, the son of promise and heir to everything that is Abraham's. So he is getting kind of near the end of his life, getting kind of old, which adds some urgency to his mission. And so he's entrusting this feat of finding a bride for his son to his oldest and chief servant, who remains nameless for the entire chapter, but he's been around a while. We'll come back to him in a bit. Abraham has a couple strong stipulations that come with this request. Number one, the bride must not come from the Canaanites, but from Abraham's own homeland, Ur of the Chaldeans. This is likely due to some of the pagan practices of the people around them, but also I think that if Abraham could speculate about the character of a woman that'd be willing to leave her homeland like he did, might be just the right fit for their family. Number two, Isaac must not go to Abraham's homeland. Isaac, the son of promise, never once left the land of promise. On these things, the servant must swear an oath, hand under Abraham's thigh. Super weird. But it has to do with swearing to the God of the covenant. So putting his hand on or near the part of the body that bore the mark of the covenant came with the understanding that you were swearing not merely to a man, but to the God of the covenant, and he is a consuming fire. So this is serious business. These are not the kind of promises that we make every day. It is clear that Abraham is confident in his servant and trusts his loyalty and his character implicitly to do his will. More importantly, though, more than being confident in his servant, Abraham is confident that the God that called him out of his land and brought him into a new one, and the God that sustained him and provided for him and protected him and made a promise to him about his generations, that he would be the same God that would lead his servant to find the right bride for his son Isaac. And so off he sends his servant on this very important mission. So, the servant. What do we know about the servant? He is believed to be Eliezer, someone Abraham mentions back in Genesis 15, who would be the one who would maybe be his heir if he had no child. And his name means God, my help. However, for this whole 67 verses, we never once hear his proper name, but only the servant. And he has the honor and responsibility to be the steward and manager of everything that is Abraham's. So let's step into the servant's shoes for just a moment at the beginning of this chapter, where he just received this commission from Abraham. Swear by the God of heaven and earth that you will go to my country and find a bride for my son. Now, if you are the servant, what are you thinking? You want me to do what now? This sounds like finding a needle in a haystack, or maybe getting a camel through the eye of a needle. Have you ever been asked to do a seemingly impossible task? What's your first response? Fear, excitement, hesitations, questions, confidence? We see consistently through the scriptures that God does not call the equipped, but he equips the called. However, the equipping doesn't always mean what we think it means, because God is more concerned with our sanctification than he is with our success. He is not merely equipping us for a job or a role, though he does that too, but he is equipping us to Christ likeness. He is equipping us for heaven And because he loves us, sometimes that equipping can look more like failure to the world. And the calling that he may have in mind for you may be different than the one that's right in front of you. One thing that appears to be clear about this servant of Abraham's is that, like Abraham, the servant is also confident in Abraham's God to do what he promised. After all these years in service to Abraham, watching his life, if there is one thing that this servant knows anything about, it is the living God. Little side note, who is watching your life? Because people are. And what you truly believe about God is evident through how you live. So, back to the servant. Full of all the authority of a chief servant on a mission, the servant sets out from Abraham's homeland. And verse 10 tells us, the servant then took 10 of his master's camels and left, taking with him all kinds of good things from his master. This tells us a couple things. Number one, the journey was long. A straight line from Canaan to Ur was about 500 miles, but the most common route was about 900. So a man traveling alone could go at about 25 miles a day, but a caravan of this magnitude, it would likely be less. So commentaries vary on this, but it could be upwards of 5 weeks if he went the long way. The second thing it tells us is that the master is rich. Again, we know this. And the servant was lavishly loaded with all the wealth and riches from Abraham. He is likely well provisioned, of course, for the going and the returning, but the emphasis really is on the master that he is representing. He came bearing a show of wealth and a multitude of extravagant gifts for the would-be bride and her family. Think Aladdin entering Agrabah. It was a little sample of the life that he was offering the bride that he found. So immediately when he arrives in Nahor, he makes a very practical and strategic choice. And verse 11, it says, he had the camels kneel down near the well outside of town. It was toward evening, the time when women go out to draw water. So the servant goes to a well. He needs water, his camels needs water, and this is where the young women go to get water for their families at the end of the day. And then he prays a specific and strategic prayer. Verse 12 to 14, then he prayed, Lord God of my master Abraham, give me success today and show kindness to my master Abraham. See, I am standing beside the spring, and the daughter of the town people are coming to draw water. May it be that when I say to a girl, please let down your jar that I may have a drink, and she says, drink, and I'll water your camels too, let her be the one you have chosen for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you've shown kindness to my master. The servant knows the gravity of the mission, and he leads with prayer because he knows that it has to be from the Lord. This is the first recorded prayer of its kind. Generally, to be in the habit of praying for signs based on circumstances is not always the best way to make decisions. However, what we should take note of is the servant's prayerful, humble dependence and confidence that the Lord would lead him through his actions and choices. Sometimes we need to act prayerfully and confidently with the knowledge the Spirit is at work inside of us and around us. Also, in this prayer, the servant wisely determines specific characteristics that he knows will be valuable to the family and the life that she would join. He's essentially saying, these are the specific things that I want to trust you for. I think they honor you and they matter practically. We can pray that specifically. He asked for a sign that was remarkable by human standards, but possible. A woman that would serve him, a stranger, and then offered to, without being asked, to draw water for 10 camels was pretty spectacular. This woman would have to have a heart of great kindness and hospitality. She would need to be observant to see the needs of others, a willing servant to fill them, and a body strong enough to do so. A camel could drink up to 10 gallons, and watering 10 of them is at least an hour of hard work. And then verses 15 to 16, just like out of a movie, lo and behold, before he has even finished praying, the Lord answers, and Rebekah enters the scene with her water jar. As it is written in Isaiah 65:24, while they are yet speaking, I will hear. So we, the readers, find out right away who her family is, that she is very beautiful and a virgin, though the servant doesn't know any of that yet. And how we know that particular part of her, I don't know, but the text lets us know. But all of these things tell us that she is the perfect answer to his prayer. God heard, God answered, and his timing is perfect. He still hears, he still answers, and his timing is still perfect. And answers that seem immediate, like in the servant's case, and in answers that are long awaited, like in Abraham's and Sarah's case. The servant approaches her, asks for a drink, and then she does exactly what he prayed for. She offers water to him and then offers to water his camels as well. And he lets her to see if she is a woman of her word. And before he confirms what family she's from, he gives her gifts of gold and asks if he can spend the night with her family. So in doing this, he has already decided with the Lord that she is the one whom the Lord has chosen. And it is only then that he finds out who her family is. What a confirmation and an affirmation of the servant's faith. And immediately he bows down and worships God, presumably right in front of her. So he is not ashamed to give glory where it is due. The servant then goes to Rebekah's home, and all the customary hospitality of hosting 10 camels and a foreign guest of this splendor ensue, including a meal. But before the servant will even partake in the meal, he wants to retell the whole story to Rebekah's family. So verses 34 to 49 is pretty much a repeat of everything we've read thus far. So when you read this chapter, what is the phrase that is repeated a lot? If you were Rebekah's family, who are you learning about? Who are you hearing about? The phrase, my master, is the refrain of this chapter, and it is repeated 22 times. After his retelling, he immediately asks for an answer for his master. Will Rebekah come with him? The servant is on this urgent mission. So ultimately, the decision is Rebekah's alone to make. Even against some of the hesitation of her own family on the timing, she agrees, and early the next morning, when the servant is anxious to get back on the road to return to Abraham, off they go with a blessing from her family, and the servant returns with Rebekah to the land of Abraham to present her to Isaac. The servant was the one that sought Rebekah out and found her. It was because of the servant that Rebekah ever knew about Isaac. So who found you? Who did God use and put in your life to bring you closer to him? Isaiah 43:4 says, because you are precious and honored in my sight, and because I love you, I will give men in exchange for you and people in exchange for your life. Because you are precious and loved by God, first Jesus was given in exchange for you and your life completely and eternally. But then there were others that gave their lives to God for yours, sacrificed their time and talent and resources that God used to bring you to him. And then once redeemed, now you become the currency of the kingdom that God uses to redeem others. We bear the role of servant to the master. Prayerfully, urgently, cannot be delayed on mission to find souls to bring to the Son. A daunting and impossible task without his help. People know God because we speak of him just like the servant speaks of his master. And we come as confident and competent ministers of a new covenant, blessed with every spiritual blessing in Christ, unafraid and unashamed to be known and identified as a master's servant, and always giving glory to him where it is due. So let us answer that call on our life. Here I am, send me. So now, Rebekah's turn. What do we know about her? She is going about her business. She is born to a particular family in a particular place at a particular time. And when it was not asked or expected of her, she sought to be a blessing. She was a woman of kindness and hospitality, and she worked to fill the needs of others. She was sought out and found, told about in an amazing family that she could be a part of but had never met. She was given lavish and extravagant gifts, and she was given a choice and chose to immediately leave her family and her father's house to be united to a new family. And her departing and prophetic blessing was in verse 60, our sister, may you increase to thousands upon thousands, and may your offspring possess the gates of their enemies. She would indeed become a mother of nations, but one day an offspring from her line would not only possess the gates of all enemies, but crush the greatest one. And not only that, but he would become the very gate by which all might enter into the presence of God himself. And Jesus says in John 10:7, I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. How cool. After that blessing, Rebekah began the journey to her new home where she would meet her husband. But based on his track record, can you imagine their conversation on the several-week journey home? I bet Rebekah longed to know everything and ask lots of questions. And I bet the servant was all too willing to share all the things so that by the time that she got there, she could not wait to meet this family. So now to our last character of the story. What do we know about Isaac? We know that he is Abraham's promised son, conceived and born to Abraham and Sarah miraculously, and heir to all. So this is the first time we've seen Isaac since he was submitted to the will of his father to be offered as a sacrifice on Mount Moriah, and now he's about to receive his bride. We find him meditating in a field, and as soon as he sees this caravan, he immediately moves towards them. That's what we know from the text. So let's shift our focus back again to the servant Rebekah for just a moment. Almost every word out of the servant's mouth has been about his master Abraham. And when Rebekah asks him in verse 65, "Who is that man in the field coming to meet us?" The servant responds, "He is my master." Wait, what? Isn't his master Abraham? Yes, but here we find that not only is his master the father, but his master is also the son. Verse 66 and 67. Then the servant told Isaac all he had done. Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah, and so she became his wife, and he loved her. The son receives, covenants with, and loves the bride that his father chose through the servant. So basically, they got married and lived happily ever after. This is the true biblical account of Isaac and Rebekah's story, but like many of these stories, the Lord in his sovereign grace and creativity is also painting us a picture. Not a perfect picture, of course, because this is still a true account, but it is indeed a shadow pointing to a greater reality, because at the end of the day, this is not just about Isaac and Rebekah's love story. It is about God's love story with his people. Let's have a quick summary of the chapter, shall we? The great Father, owner of all, commissions his servant to find a bride for his son who is heir to all things. The servant does all of the going, all of the seeking and finding of the potential bride who has been pre-selected by the Lord himself. The servant speaks only of the Father and the Son, and he is the giver of lavish gifts, an expression of the love and beauty of the kingdom from which he came. The woman acts, but does relatively little in comparison to the magnitude of the attention, for it is really the Lord that already chose her. The servant makes his request, and the decision is hers alone to make. She believes what has been said by the servant about his master and agrees to return with him as a bride. She leaves her father's house to be united to the son. The servant then journeys back from which he came and delivers a spotless bride to her groom. And the bridegroom receives her, and he loves her. So who is who in this picture? Abraham is a picture of God the Father, the sender. The servant is a picture of the Holy Spirit, the sent. John 14:26, Jesus tells us of the Spirit whom the Father will send in his name. Obviously, there's no hierarchy in the Godhead. And then Isaac is a picture of Jesus, the Son, and Rebekah is a picture of the bride, you. And just like a wedding, Genesis 24 bids us to remember our own story, how we were pursued and found and brought into the kingdom of the Son. The chapter shows us who God is, what he is like, and who we are in light of that. The whole Godhead, the Trinity, is involved in your salvation. Unlike Rebekah, we are not that beautiful or hardworking or kind or hospitable, though by sanctification hopefully we become so, but instead we were once objects of wrath, lost, discarded, alone, blind, and in spite of that, the Father chose you. Jesus bought you, and the Spirit sought you and brought you in to become daughters of the King and brides to the Son. God is the hero of this love story, and he is the one who finds us, saves us, justifies us, sanctifies us, and glorifies us. Is this not a beautiful story? One that can be retold over and over. You are the Son's beloved just because you are. That is the truest thing about you, whether you believe it or not. We never outgrow it. We never outlive our heart's need to know it. That's why we retell ourselves a story, so we can remember it and live out of it. So how can we live as loved ones already, not trying to become one worthy of love? Because performance is a terrible master, and it is never satisfied, and it's most definitely not who our God is. So how do we do that? Live as a loved one already. How do we respond? How do we say, Lord, I love you too? John has a lot to tell us about that. In 1 John 4:16, he says, and so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God and God in him. And again in 2 John 1:6, he says, and this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. As you have heard from the beginning, his command is that you walk in love. So to live as a loved one is to live in joyful obedience to the one who loves us, empowered by the very Spirit that testifies that truth in our hearts. The Son says of you, you are my beloved, and our hearts say of him, I am my beloved's, and my beloved's is mine. The gospel is the greatest love story, and it's yours and it's mine. And it is a treasure imperishable, unfading, and eternal.